today?
Just,
Not here.
not that I would know.
Not here. I can't talk about it. Okay. University, one of the biggest. So it has a college culture, which makes it okay. But it's like Houston. You know, the thing I
This is what I learned
Years
from
of
Volker and Mark.
practice.
So, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests and scholars, it's my pleasure to welcome everybody present here in this room tonight. We are very fortunate to have a prominent guest, a relevant person in the world of architecture. Charles Renfro is in the house. Applause. Charles, you are a partner in the New York-based firm Diller Scofidio. I thought it's plus Renfro because you are, anyway, you're always a plus. But you told me it's Diller Scofidio and Renfro. We met each other 1.5 years ago. We talked about architecture. We talked about common activities. We talked about your activities in the US and New York. And we talked about our activities in Germany. And we very soon came to the point and came to the academy. And I said, look, we always want to do something relevant, something for the society, which is interesting to all of us. And I said, I would like to do a workshop on a global problem. And the global problem was at that time, and it is still a problem, the vacancy of high-rise buildings. Whether you look to China or you look to the US, sometimes also to Europe, they all are empty. And then you said, I remember that moment, you said, I have an idea. And you came up with the ExxonMobil headquarter, the former ExxonMobil headquarter in your hometown, Houston, Texas. And that was the moment where everything started. And now you are here, and we are very, very happy that this all happens, and you helped us a lot to do this workshop. You received the scholars, you received the tutors, you received all the people from the AAC 2 weeks ago, and now you are here, and there are much more things to come, common activities. I would like to say nothing so much about your office. I mean, everybody knows Diller Scofidio and Renfro, and you can tell us much better who you are and what you do. And that's why I'm saying thank you very much for coming. The stage is yours. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Hi there. Can everybody hear? It seems so. I always like to start my talks by saying, I'm from Texas. I don't need a microphone. But I'll try to speak quietly tonight. So I'm really thrilled to be here in your beautiful offices with this stunning view of an industrial landscape, which in a way is reminiscent of Houston, a place that is made up of half, industry and half something else. It's not quite city. It's some people have termed it Drosscape, whatever. But to me, it's all about possibility. And that's why I think the Houston problem, I'm talking to the people in the program here, I think the Houston problem is really quite wonderful because it's about possibility. Houston is never made, it's never done, it's always in the process of being done. And that's why I think if we take the problem seriously, and I'll talk about this more tomorrow in our crit, if we take the problem seriously, I think we can make something really relevant in this absolutely unique, grown out of the possibilities of that site. So we'll talk about that more tomorrow. But mostly I'm really happy to be here. It's true, I came knocking on GMP's door. I said, can we work together on something? Anyway, and then it turned out that it's AAC, which, I teach and I practice. I do all of it, little bits of it all. I'm going to try to talk for an hour. Today's talk is really intended to showcase a portion, a section of our work that is maybe not the most famous, but some of our famous pieces. But mostly it's to showcase a practice that we do, which is to, it's kind of cultural archaeology. In that I've given because I knew I would have jet lag, I gave myself words. So, no, it's terrible, I know, I apologize. But you can read them too. I know some of you do not speak English as a native language, so you can read these things. Sometimes most impactful architecture is hiding in plain sight. So one of our practices in DSNR is to drill down on a site. And a site is not just the physical location, it's the historical, cultural, technical kind of milieu that surrounds a project. It's not just a place. And always by drilling down, you can always unearth the most exciting things. That's what this talk is about. And so some of these projects are adaptive reuse, some which is very relevant to what we're doing here at AAC. Some of it is just sheer fun, and you'll know that in just 1 minute. And so our site, our journey, the DSR journey begins with Blur. Okay, so this is a project you might know. This is the first project I drew on, someone was asking about AutoCAD. I drew this on AutoCAD too, on ArchiCAD. This is a project that's made entirely of its site. Yes, it's got fog nozzles, but the thing that makes the piece of architecture, which is changeable, movable, tasteless, weightless, constantly evolving, is made of the lake itself, Lake Neuchâtel. It's presented back as this immersive environment. And the way that we did that was just a clever reimagining or rehanging of 33,000 lettuce misters. So something you could buy in a Grainger catalog, hanging on a rather innovative tensegrity structure and here's the lettuce mister. It's really off-the-shelf product, just used, kind of in a kind of ridiculous proportion. And it made a cloud that was the size of a football field that one could walk through and inhabit. And this was a temporary pavilion for the Swiss Expo 2002. When we were tasked with the job, they said make a media pavilion because we hadn't really built a lot, and this is in the early 2000s. And Liz and Rick and I, to a certain degree, had made our practice be about interrogation of culture through the use of media. And they thought, well, they're going to make some great giant, 100-meter high video screen, and rather than do something digital that was trying to recreate some kind of verisimilitude, we did something completely mechanical, something that would defy, first of all, what people started to think about our own practice, but that sort of illustrated one of the principles that guides our practice to this day, which is you need just look at the site that you have to find incredible things about it. Now it turns out that to pump lake water into misters, you have to clean it really, really thoroughly. And probably some of you know this, but there's phytoplankton that live in the water, and if you don't clean it with a sand filter, you can actually get sick and die. And we didn't want one of our first pieces of architecture to cause any deaths. But what we liked about this project is that, and it's also something that we try to do in all of our projects, which is to understand a kind of cultural framing of an experience. And here, we wanted to do something that would be fun to look at, but then something that would rob you of your sense of vision. And so visuality and vision, sight, these are things that we interrogate in our work a lot. And by taking the kind of understood idea of vision away, something that might have been held in the pixels, but that we stripped entirely, you fall back on your other senses. And you realize how dependent we are on vision, as the master says. Jump forward 10 years, and with the High Line, we had the opportunity to remake an abandoned rail line that was 3 kilometers long, and it had only been used for about 40 years to transport food, essentially, to all of the neighborhoods of lower Manhattan. It was abandoned after the interstate highway system came on, and the government, the city of New York, didn't know what to do with it, so they just let it lie fallow and become a kind of industrial ruin. This isn't actually a picture from the High Line, but what happened was nature took hold. Nature always seems to win; it takes hold. So in the cracks between the ties that hold the rails together, and in the side areas of the line, green started growing, and it became this very verdant park. And sorry, I've gotten a summer cold. Inadvertently verdant, with the green and the gray mixing together. When we were given the opportunity to design the park, we knew it was already a great park. It had made itself into a great park. All we had to do was pay honor and homage to the things that had already happened naturally. The ruin was taken over by green. The green was weeds. The weeds were indexed by Piet Oudolf, our Dutch horticulturist, and brought back as 80% of the planting on the line. So if you've been to the High Line, which I'm sure most of you have, the planting that you see there that looks so beautiful and lush and exquisite and whatever, it's weeds. And it was weeds that were already growing on the line. Again, so just like looking at what's there, hiding in plain sight. The gorgeousness of the planting on the High Line came right from what was already there. The planks that we designed allowed the green to grow through. We're very conscious of various types of ecologies. You know, we had imagined that because we were using plants that were either native to New York City or they grew beautifully in New York City, that means that they have some sort of alignment with the ecology of the city, that it would naturally, oh, hi, Igor. This is Igor. He's our partner here from Rice. He'll get up. We're going to make you talk later. So anyway, we knew that if the plants felt at home in New York City, so would the birds and the bees. And so we knew that it would be something that would attract migration, which it has. It has become a really favorite destination point, stopover point on birds migrating south and north. It's also, we're also very much interested in culture and the way that ecology is also about human nature and human culture. And we were designing the line. It was running through some of New York's seediest neighborhoods where there were, transvestite hookers and gay bars, and it was rather seedy. We wanted to pay homage to that, tribute to that, by making this park be a park that's not about recreation, not about walking your dog, not about, running or jogging, but really about just existing and communicating with each other, whether you're a cruiser or a bird watcher, whatever it is. So the line is a different kind of public space in New York City. It's a line about being a flaneur. It's sort of encapsulating the idea of wandering in a long public space. This is a picture from when it opened. It's grown, and the plants just absolutely love it here because they already loved it before we touched it. There's one, so what Rick Scofidio, who passed away just a few months ago, sadly, but he was the champion of the line from our side, and he used to say that we saved the line from architecture. Even though we're architects, we saved it from architecture, and I think that is a really great way to think of it. These are just snapshots of, and this is a more recent one. You can see how the trees have come in, enclosing parts of the line. The best thing about the line is it's not a park. It has green. You could call it a park. It's run by the Parks Department, but it's really an observation platform. It's an observation platform where the people are observing each other, interacting with each other, but it's a place where people get to see and experience New York in ways they've never experienced. The existing line touched buildings, went adjacent to their loading docks, passed through buildings. It's kind of a pornographic situation, an urban pornography. And we wanted to just keep that going. So we took advantage of moments where the structure was overwrought, oversized, and like here at 10th Avenue at the crossing, the beams were so deep we could get an entire floor down to the very bottom of the beam. So we made this observation deck that lets people sit there and look at the tail lights of people going up 10th Avenue. Such a quotidian display. I don't think anybody's ever really highlighted before. But what it does is it makes you think about the world around you, the city around you, the New York City that you don't ever see. You're in, but you never really see. And we encourage people to take advantage of each situation. Lots of weddings, lots of impromptu musical elements have happened there. This is when the High Line opened. The first Standard Hotel opened, and it crossed the High Line, and so it's like with its legs straddling over the line. You can only imagine Andre Balazs, who is a little bit of a bad boy hotelier, encouraged, so it's been said, his employees and his guests to put on a bit of a show for people on the High Line. And of course, we love that. We love it when something inspires people to act. And we got so excited about this. And again, this is about mining what's there. We, and especially Liz Diller, wrote an opera called Mile Long Opera with David Lang doing the music. And two poets, both based in New York. And we essentially looked at what we had already done to the city with our line and brought that back into the High Line, a very solipsistic work, very meta. The Mile Long Opera was done in a complete inversion of the audience-performer relationship. Here, the audience would walk the entire length of the line, and the performers, 1,000 singers, from all ages, from professional to amateur to kids, church choirs, school choirs, they were stationary. And they all sang in the same key. 7 different songs, I think it's seven or eight songs, that were composed by David Lang to all be able to be sung together. And so as audience member, you would go down the line and encounter each of these singers face to face. You could go stand up in their face. It was really thrilling, a little bit unnerving, but truly unique. We just heard last week that they are likely to revive this in the coming year or two. So I do encourage people to come to this. I mean, this lady was a trip. She's like amateur musical lady, but she was into it anyway. But you don't get to do that kind of thing normally, and I have to give Liz Diller tons of credit here because she really pushed this through. Anyway, so excuse me, again, it's about looking at what's there in front of you and like just pulling it out, magnifying it, beefing it up, whatever. This High Line project was so successful. It's been copied in hundreds of projects around the world. I mean, it's not to say that we were the first Rails to Trails project. This is a fairly standard thing that's happening, where industrial sites that have since been abandoned are being turned over to public use. But I think it's been one of the most iconic, given that it threads its way right through the center of New York City. It's so iconic that it's found its way into comic books, and there was a perfume made about it. But most importantly, and this gets into the AAC and what working in downtown Houston, perhaps on the Humble building, does is it has become the most tourist destination in New York City, 8 million people, which is a blessing and a curse, but it's been a huge boom for the economy, and sort of redevelopment around it has been, it's turned that neighborhood, again, a blessing and a curse, into one of the most expensive neighborhoods in New York City, but also a real engine for making money for New York. These are all the projects that have been made since the High Line was made, and most of them were made directly on the line, and that is because we rewrote the zoning when we made the line. We rewrote the zoning to allow for medium-high buildings to be made right on the line. They could touch the line if they put an elevator and a bathroom in, and the owners could transfer air rights from their medium-high buildings to the edges of the blocks to make high-rise buildings. And so there was a kind of handshake deal to keep development dense but low along the line, to mimic what was there to begin with, and then to boost the development in the rest of Chelsea. I mean, it's been interesting, and here the cover of New York Magazine says it all. It says how a park built on a junk heap became a glamorous symbol of everything you love and hate about the new New York. And and so I think that's pretty interesting. This does go to gentrification, which is one of the things that we have to look out for when we do projects that are remaking our cities as we know them. Somebody's going to get left behind. Somebody's going to win. You can't solve all the problems all at once. But this seems unrelated, but it's related. So with the Broad Museum, what we tapped into, the hidden thing that we tapped into, was the youth of Los Angeles. And we did that in two ways. One, we made the museum ticket-free in conjunction with the Broad Foundation. And we also made it barrier-free, not in a physical way, but just the way that you enter. There's no front desk. There's no people. You make a reservation online. And here it is in downtown LA. And I'll get to the stats and the success of this project in a moment. But this was, again, drilling down into the site. Here, the people of Los Angeles, what was missing, what was a potential. Los Angeles, like Houston, is a very diverse city. However, it's much more segregated than Houston. And the Broad has successfully brought together whole distinct populations of people in Los Angeles and ages in Los Angeles. And the idea here, and this is an idea that recurs in our V&A project that I'll show in a moment, was that since the museum itself was half storage facility and half display facility, that rather than putting the storage facility in the back or in the basement or in a place where it wouldn't be seen, we would actually feature the storage facility itself as an element in the museum, something that offered resistance to a standard museum visit. And so we turned the storage facility into a thing called the vault. And then that thing was in turn covered with a light scuppering veil that would make on the roof of the vault the museum space itself. It's a small museum, but it's been very impactful in LA. Here's the veil. You can see how all of the pores of the veil, also sort of like a sponge, are angled in the exact same direction against direct Southern California sun, so it lets in only indirect sun and shields the interior from the direct sun. And this is before we had quite finished moving in, but this is the idea. No desks, no people. There's a front door. There's one person that will check to make sure that you've checked in. And up you go, up an escalator, swallowed up. One-way escalator takes you up to art heaven, I like to call it. A sun-drenched, not directly, but indirectly sun-drenched acre of floor space that would be used for the contemporary art of Eli Broad's collection. And here it is without any walls. The whole thing beautifully bathed in light. This is the first show, which I think it's 10 years old now. And you can see how you can just put the walls in. His collection is considered one of the world's best contemporary collections. And then what happens is when you finish doing the tour of the museum floor, the gallery floor, you're treated to a different route out. And that route out lets you explore the archive. It lets you go behind the scenes to see what normally you're never given access to. Here, looking at the racks of painting, storage, that's the stair going down. You can also see in the elevator going down the back of house. probably 5 to 20% of a museum's collection is ever on display at once. That means that, 95 to 80% is in storage. And we'll talk about that in a second. So what happened here? So I'm just going to read a couple of these points. So 62% identify themselves as other than Caucasian, which I think a big percentage of them say this is the first time they visited an art museum, which is pretty amazing. Let's see, compared to the national average, yes, of 23% is non-Caucasian. Also 33 years old, more than 12 years younger than a National Art Museum average. And so I think that this is, while the Broad Foundation decided to make this a free museum, and we decided to work on that with them by making this be a digital interface to make a timed entry, which was a way to kind of get people, their phones to have become part of the experience, has been hugely successful. So it's a kind of collaboration, it's a collusion between architecture, technology, location, and sort of understanding. And so, what's drawing millennials to downtown LA Broads Museum? Of course, it's the art, too. The art is fun, it's big, it's saucy, if you know that word. I don't know if there's a German equivalent. But saucy. But spicy, spicy. Anyway, it's been hugely successful, and I think that part of it is because of the design and a consideration of all the layers of things that add up to a successful project. It's not just the way something looks or how it's made, but how it operates now and into the future. There's also a park next door with 125-year-old trees. It's been so successful that, guess what? We're adding on to it. We are happy that we got this commission because, believe me, the board thought maybe it should go to another architect, maybe GMP. I don't know. But we got the commission. It's hard to add onto your own building. You can tell that we were inspired by a fellow German a little bit. Marcel Breuer came into the picture, who is one of my favorite architects, by the way. And so, but what this the solid version wanted to be opposite to the light emitting, but it actually does something really new and interesting and really cool. So up on the top floor, the third floor of the Broad, which is all light, top lit, when you get into the new area, you're actually going outdoors. And so it's a sequence of outdoor courtyards that link a series of small galleries dedicated to different artists. So it's a completely different experience that unexpectedly brings the indoors out and the outdoors in. Something you would never think if you know the existing Broad. And here are the Breuer-like windows that frame beautiful views. And we're always anticipating a future with media that's different than what we have now. What will happen in the future? We don't know. In the world of culture, you can't predict. We expanded the something happened here. Fascinating. Oh, it does show there. Fascinating. Okay. Anyway, we've expanded the storage area that now actually will be a little bit more publicly available to wander through. And the point here is that it's got this tiny museum has a whole huge collection of moods and experiences and rental possibilities. There's a space down below that will become a kind of event space. So you're always having to think about the layers of use, the different populations, all of this stuff. And then just 2 weeks ago, this is related, directly on the, kind of on the conceptual heels of the Broad, the Victoria and Albert East Storehouse opened just 2 weeks ago. Victoria and Albert is one of the museums with one of the largest collections in the world, and the collections are wild. Okay, this is an idea out of a collection. A collection can look like this. You have no idea what's there. A collection could be of books, of scissors, or whatever, butterflies. I mean, these are all things that are potentially in the V&A's collection. spaces, environments, pieces of architecture, so that we wanted to make the building, the entire building, feel like a cabinet of curiosities, a place that is not necessarily curated, but it's available for you to see. And sometimes the juxtapositions make unknown stories come to life, depending on the viewer. We wanted to, these are the principles that guided the design. We're building in a warehouse building, completely unassuming warehouse building that had been the press center for the Olympics, the London Olympics a few years ago. And we're filling that place out with storage racks, high density, dumb storage racks, and then excavating the experience from those storage racks. So we're sort of making a field and taking things out of the field to make the experience. This is what it looks like on the outside, completely unassuming. And then this is the section. You're taken from the ground floor to an elevated platform that's carved out of the storage. And so you'll see this in greater detail in a second. And you know, we're always interested in the reveal. Architecture can be like movies. There is cinema, there's time, there's a space. And like the Broad, when you go up the escalator and find yourself in this heavenly lit museum space, or you're in Jordan, at whatchamacallit, I always forget the name of this place. Petra, thank you. And you walk through cracks in the walls to see a fully formed temple. That's what we were trying to do here. So this isn't; these are actual photos from a couple of weeks ago. This is the stair coming from the ground floor. This is not an actual photo. This is what we intended it to look like. And another one here with a glass floor. And then even thinking about how the place could be used, you know, for different things. And then this is it. This is what it's what it looks like, pretty much like our rendering. So an atrium, a kind of agora, where you just get a sense of the scale and depth and diversity of the pieces that are stored here. That's Robin Hood section of the Smithson's Robert Hood Gardens, which was demolished 5 years ago, but pieces of it are now hanging there permanently. And off of this central space are a series of places that you can go. Again, this is operating somewhere between a research facility, storage facility, and a museum. The public is welcome here, and they can go a lot of places one could never normally go. But we have, in a very precise way, made some of the artifacts available and put on a kind of route, tour route. I'll show you a couple of those in a second. And so, in essence, it's like a Noli plan of storage, you know, the density, thickness of storage in these different methodologies: compact storage, storage on shelves, storage that's purpose held in rooms, and then very tall storage. And then this is kind of what it looks like, the excavation. Again, it's all about archaeology. It's all kind of archaeology, the space that we made ourselves that we could then act on. So there's an action performed on the space. And then here's some more photos from the actual place. It's very close to here. You can go to London very easily. You should go check it out. The ends of the storage racks are always thought to be mini displays that would be changed and potentially given over to some idea or concept about groupings. I believe that you can also scan QR codes on all of these elements and find information about them as you walk through. Sometimes we just leave them in their crates and expose them in their crates. And that's an important part of this. This is a costume shop that's visible as you walk through. And then this is one of the ceiling. This is a ceiling relic from Spain, and it's there in its entirety, placed overhead in approximately the dimension it would have been found in the original palace. I think this is from Andalusia. But what's really fun is that on the outside, you get to see the structure that holds it up, both the structure that we made, but also the structure that is integral to the piece itself. So it's always a sort of looking at things front and back, and understanding the both sides of the narrative. There's always two sides. And then this racks and racks and racks and racks of storage of paintings. And this is the conservation lab. You recognize that kind of idea from the Broad, where you're given access, visual access, with an overlook, and then even an interface where you can explore what they're working on through a kind of digital interface that's right there on the overlook. So you get, you get to kind of construct your own tour, construct your own, the depth of knowledge, stay there as long or as little as you want. We were able to show things that could never be shown in a museum. This is a Picasso mural, and I apologize, I don't know all of its story, but it's obviously big. and we were able to show it inexpensively. This is not in downtown. This is in East London, and where they had the Olympics. And therefore, the space in which this artifact is held is less expensive. You can dedicate time and space to something like this. And this is getting closer to some of the work that we're doing here at AAC. In Boston, we're transforming the Metropolitan Storage Warehouse, which was made in the late 1900s in Boston, into the new School of Architecture for MIT. And everybody who's been to Cambridge knows this building. It's this beautiful, hulking, really long building, which is actually a set of 5 different buildings. And something that we're very interested in doing, again, is sort of the archaeology, or the violent archaeology, of Gordon Matta Clark. This is Gordon Matta Clark operating on a building in Soho after it was declared that it would be taken down. Gordon Matta Clark is, of course, one of New York City's great minimal sculptors, and his sculpture was made through extraction. Or severing, and so it was all made by an act, and so the V&A building was also sort of subtraction too. We're very interested in this idea of the cut and the reveal. So for MIT, the building had terrible floor-to-floor heights to begin with, very little light, couldn't be used for an architecture school, so we had to do some major renovations. So in every building, we took out a center atrium space. You can see that represented in this glazed plexi block. And then we hung from the top down, resting on the very heavy-duty bearing walls of the building, we hung the new studio space with ample light and ample distance so that you could have a proper architecture school within this building. This is an actual photo of the guys cutting the building up, and to make way for these suspended spaces. These are the architecture studios, suspended within the density, the flesh of the existing brick building. And this is the actual. I mean, this is months ago. The building is almost finished, but this gives you a sense of how the structure needles its way, feathers its way into the existing building. And here's where I think, without leading the jury, where getting into the Humble building in Houston, like there are ways that extraction can make the existing better and make the extraction better, and to make really new kinds of architecture that are about crossbreeding old and new, spatially and system-wise. So that's as much as I'll say about that today. And then where we put new floors in, some locations we put new floors, we also put new windows, and the windows just happen to intersect the old windows in very again, almost pornographic ways. Like that shouldn't happen. It should not be exposed to public. But we think it's pretty cool. This is the way it's starting to look. And we also wanted to, on the short end of the western end of the building, to put new holes through with a circular drill. This is the circular drill going, and then you can see we use the brick as stools, and no one's going to take those stools to their dorm room. I'm just saying, this is it's a self-defense about being stolen. And then, here's the main lecture space, and just, given a window through cutting the brick wall out. So this is the actual cut of the brick wall. And then here's our little model, and then this is what it's starting to look like. Unfortunately, the glass is far more mirrored than, and the same thing happened to all of you saw in Houston at our building at Rice that's going up. Same problem. They have coatings. You have to put them on for energy, and unfortunately, it doesn't do exactly what you're advertising. This is something we all need to work on together. I really think glass and glass coatings really need to work on this. Okay, how long have I been talking? 36. I promised I'm going to finish in an hour, which I think is the case. Therefore, I'm going to take a sip of wine. Here is not an adaptive reuse, but you can see it's an adaptive. I'm just going to try to make up a new term. It's basically being taken from a Class C office building to a Class A office building, which is not something we're talking about for the Humble building, but it is something that is happening. So one of the ways that people, that the places are combating their obsolete office buildings is by upgrading their obsolete office buildings into not obsolete office buildings. It's not a race to the bottom; it's a race to the top in a way. And I think it's bringing about quite a bit of innovation. So this is Gare Montparnasse, which was made in the early 60s. It was designed in the early 60s after World War II. It involved removing an old Beaux-Arts train station and making this big modernist thing that probably a lot of you have been through. It's one of Paris's most busy. And spanning the top of the train station, you can see it on the right, is an office building, sort of just a nothing office building. Nothing burger. Anytime I say burger, I'm going to think about Hamburg, because it's like this is the origin of hamburger. Anyway, nothing burger. God, never mind. I just went down a rabbit hole. But anyway, sitting on top of that station is this 16-story sort of nothing office building, very low floor-to-ceiling heights, broken up into 3 distinct fire compartments that didn't ever allow it to be joined together, and essentially had become a kind of a place with small tenants and this and that. And one of the things that Paris is trying to do is to make a 15-minute city. This is Anne Hidalgo, the mayor there, has been quite great at saying, you should be working in the center. You should have everything at your fingertips. You should have to walk no more than 15 minutes to get anything you need for your daily life. And that means bringing larger scale corporations into the city. And so the developers of the building, they purchased it, Altaria, and became our client. And their hope is to bring a new life to this building, to update it in a whole bunch of different ways, and to attract ultimately larger scale tenancy from a tech company or a financial company that will bring a new kind of life to this part of Paris. And so this little diagram here, it really says a lot. So Playtime, you recognize Playtime, this most fabulous movie, Jacques Tati movie about Paris, was literally modeled on this building. If you've seen Playtime, it was literally modeled on this building. And so what we're trying to do is, it had been updated a little bit. A 2000s office building. You understand it. It started in Silicon Valley. There's couches, there'd be ping pong and maybe slides or whatnot. But what we decided was that this building would be a microcosm of the city itself, almost taking Anne Hidalgo's idea, a 15-minute city, and bringing it into this place itself and opening itself up to the public. And we're getting some of it done. In the end, there was a little bit of creative wishful thinking that is not being executed, but the thoughts that generated the design are very much still in place. And the idea was that you pepper the building with different uses, and different and with different populations and different uses. So it becomes a whole mixed-use place. The other thing that we're doing, and this is also in conjunction with Anne Hidalgo's office, is greening the entire district. The Jardin Atlantique, which is on the lower part of this page on the left, was already there. It's a garden, but one of the things that we wanted to do with our building and the top of Gare Montparnasse is to make them all public and to bring a new kind of green, almost in the line of the in the vein of the High Line, open them up to the public. That was also going to happen on Tour Montparnasse, which is being done by Richard Rogers' office, and is about in the same state of development as ours. And so here you see some of the components. We basically stripped the entire building down, took everything out except for the slabs, and we're even remaking a lot of the cores, so that most of the embodied carbon is held within the concrete. It's still there, although we've done very sculptural cutouts to make it have a more dynamic sculptural form. We've turned the roof into a farm, essentially a farm for use by the tenants of the building, with a folly that you'll see in just a second that rides down the top of the roof. Turned the roof of the Gare Montparnasse, the lower base of the building, into a public park that is available from that number 5 on the left-hand side of the page here, and then brought. This is not going to happen, but this was our idea: was to bring that park down to the Place Raoul Dutry, which is the place right in front of Gare Montparnasse. The idea was to pull everything together, to pull the ground up the top, to pull the top up to the tip top, and to make the public have access to parts in between. So this is what the renovated building would look like. It had no green whatsoever before on the building, either the base or the top. And we also were making a new facade, and we became very interested in minimalism. Knowing that some of the high modernist buildings, probably Mies van der Rohe was the one who actually realized this best, but also, fellow German, but also Gordon Bunshaft, American, also did some fantastic work here. But the idea was to think about serialism as the inspiration for the remake of the facade, where tiny variations it's a kind of quixotic, hypnotic image of the entire building with tiny variations, and the tiny variations themselves would create a kind of new identity. This is what the old building looked like. And so in our new rendition, so this is doing a whole bunch of little things. So all the glass has been taken off, and we're putting giant pieces of glass that are the size of one office each. They're on an angle, and they're very slightly tipped forward, so that when you stand in the Place, as you are here, you're actually seeing all of Paris reflected behind you, and all of Paris is on the other side of you. So, and then occasionally, I'm not sure how well this is projecting, but you can kind of see through some of these, and some of them are more mirrored depending on the time of day. The idea is that it would just subtly shift all the time, and become a kind of kaleidoscopic representation of Paris back to itself. On top is this farm, which is actually still happening, and a folly. And the folly is a digital kind of element, and that digital element is does a whole bunch of things. It collects solar energy. It collects rain. It's actually is a huge storage tank on wheels, and that rain then is released on the plants below, and it waters them successively. It can be used to shade plants that don't want harsh sunlight when they're just germinating or when they're, making fruit or flowers. Excuse me. And also the underside of this is a big video screen that would be visible from a lot of different places. And doing things like, on a cloudy day, it would bring sunshine, or on a sunny day, it would bring clouds and rain, literally raining on the plants below. You can also see what we've tried to do on the ends, what we call the pignon, where we've scooped out every other floor plate to make a series of indoor-outdoor spaces where the building is completely aerated on the end. Oh, this is what it looks like underneath the rolling element there. The lovely farm workers imported from Provence for the picture, having a really nice time there. And then at night, doing something unexpected. This was an earlier version where we had wanted to make the whole upper part a greenhouse, which actually I think it's better now with the crawly element. But here you can see the park inspired by the High Line, given over to the city, as well as the pixelation of the end by virtue of pulling sections of the slab out. You can see how short the floor plates are. So we've the floor to floors are. So we had to rip out drop ceiling where we could, and then kind of selectively scoop out some slabs to make double height spaces, and at the ends scoop out slabs outside and inside to make a series of cascading double height spaces, all with good views, because it is Paris after all. And this is actually what we're building right now, and it's about to start construction. So as of this date, we do not have the rolling mechanism on the top, but we have most everything else. But okay, let's see. Only 10 more minutes. Okay, I think I have 2 more projects. Now, New National Museum of Transport. This is an adaptive reuse, and it is an important one in a number of ways. There's a lot of detail here, but I'm just going to go through it. This is the old train maintenance yard of Hungary, of Budapest, a brick building, brick and concrete building built after World War II, immediately after World War II. The first version of it was destroyed in World War II. You can see just to the right in that blue section is Gustav Eiffel had designed that storage facility, which was not, or warehouse, or maintenance facility, which was not destroyed, and our side is in the orange. And before World War II, it was a traditional 19th century brick factory building where they did fabricate the train cars. This is what it looked like after World War II. Actually, quite a really wonderful specimen of modern industrial architecture. And so with selective demolition, you'll see how we've turned that into an ultra-modern interpretive museum. This is the kind of thing that happened there. Locomotives would go, they wouldn't be fabricated there, but they would be deconstructed and reconstructed and worked on. There were elements in the building that moved, giant gantry cranes up above, and then this, what we call the slider, which moved locomotives and other train parts across the width of the warehouse, and we still can. That slider still works, and so that will become part of our exhibition. Just some more images. Beautiful precast concrete beams that are castellated with holes, and put on these wonderful concrete columns that have haunches to take them. Just so much wonderful detailing. And when you get up close, you realize it was all handmade. I mean, it looks like it was, you probably know this, Igor, from like being in Serbia. You know, like it looks like really pristine, you know, kind of factory made, but it's all handmade. So it has this really wonderful feeling. And then Hungary itself was real innovator in terms of transit. It has the second oldest subway system in Europe. And then during the Soviet times, it made virtually all of the buses, the articulated buses, for all of the Soviet bloc and Eastern Europe. So it has this very illustrious past, and that's why they had the idea to turn this old facility into the transport museum. There is a transport museum already downtown, but they aren't able to show their trains and bigger artifacts. So we won this in competition, and the idea was to essentially hollow out the innards of the building, leaving storage, dense storage on the edges, and making a very beautiful, very flexible, very modern, glassy vitrine on the inside that's partly in the building and partly outside the building as a new build. And so this is what the plan looks like, all integrated into a kind of industrial garden that we worked with Grossmax Studio on. This is just gives you a clear sense of the space itself. It's just really stunning, beautiful space with incredible natural light. And that's what we wanted to do with it, essentially, was to just leave it. You know, leave it exposed, expose the concrete, expose the columns, and then put all of the storage, just like we did at V&A, on the edges. Yes, put a nice piece of expensive glass so that you can see the storage as a vitrine. And then the exhibit, which can change over time, would be in the central part of the floor. The new building on the outside of the existing warehouse would be a kind of piano-like, very simple, elegant, softly, naturally lit space that the trains could be housed in. And then the trains would actually come through the glass into vitrines on their own, visible to everyone who comes to the site, day or night, 24/7, in vitrines that are part of the park itself. I think that's probably why we won the competition, was putting these train cars out over the park. And then there's an upstairs gallery and event space and restaurant that will allow the building to have a kind of life that's beyond just exhibits. We're also really interested in, with this project, being very innovative with our sustainability. So we have photovoltaics everywhere, but particularly covering the parking on the northeast corner of the site. So there's PVs and there's ground source heat pump. That's actually geothermal deep well. They're a kilometer apart to offset some heating and cooling. And of course, working with the plants and nature to collect water, to purify the water, to reuse the gray water from the museum, etc. And that's sort of the way it looks from above. That's our sort of money shot of how it will look. Unfortunately, and over the past 4 years, since we finished the design about 3 years ago, in the past 4 years, it's been open in the summer to show the collection already, to try to, it's a proof of concept. But unfortunately, the government in Hungary is not interested in making great museums for the people. They're interested in taking their money and putting it outside of the city of Budapest. So we're hoping that the museum will be made eventually. It's obviously a fantastic museum, or it will be, and sometimes architecture takes a long time. It has to get through some certain administrations. Here, this is a really nice way to see the head house. You can see it there with those Y columns, concrete columns. This is actually on the historic register in Hungary, so the building can't be taken down. And the only thing that really makes sense to put there is a transport museum. So I don't know what Victor's waiting for. But anyway, it's a very cool project. and of course a crowd pleaser. Let's see. Yeah, now I'm getting into my final little things. I'm almost done. Just some fun little add-ons. You may have seen that in Venice last month we made a project called Canal Cafe, and the idea was that we would take. Oh yes, Canal Cafe won the Golden Lion at the Biennale. Okay. Anyway, the idea was this is a serious problem. You know, like you've got water in Venice. Venice is water. The water is rising. The water is polluted. Then you've got the genteel culture of Italy, which is what better typifies that culture than a cup of espresso. And so somehow, if you can merge up the problem with the product and make them synonymous with each other, sustainability becomes part of luxury, of life. And so that's what we did here. The idea was to take the water from the canal, pump it through bioremediation filters, 3 of them, a 3-sequence bioremediation, then through a reverse osmosis filter to take the salt out, or to balance the salt actually, then push it through the coffee to make espresso. This was our rendering. This is the system. You know, it required some engineering. We worked with great partners. This is not a lone project. There are 5 or 6 partners, and I cannot name them all right now, but thank them. I'm thanking them all. Thank you for those of you watching online. But, you know, sometimes the easiest looking things are the most complicated things to do. This is a section showing the 4 bioremediation tanks, and then the reverse osmosis, which is the last step, and then the coffee pavilion. And this is actually a photo from last month of the thing in action, and you know, simply just showing itself off, being very clear what it's kind of doing, and then the espresso machine itself, a work of art, sitting there, not giving coffee. This is for sale, and by the way, this will be up and around until November, so you still have plenty of time to go to Venice and try yourself a cup of canal coffee. I don't know what that military guy is. What is that? I don't know. Is he going to try to shut us down? Is he an ICE agent or something? I don't know. Anyway, the really cool project, blah, blah, blah. This is the very last thing, and it's just something that I'm going to put up here, and I might have shown this in Houston a couple of weeks ago to you guys, but you know, this all started with Hudson Yards, and we were working in Hudson Yards and in New York, this interest in the remake of these buildings. And for a minute, nobody thought Hudson Yards would survive. No one. And it's also tragically ugly. And so I started to think about, well, you know, what makes a city great is its diversity of all the uses and all together, and it's kind of be ugly, and you know, and that's one of the reasons Houston's kind of fascinating. It's like, you know, a muffler shop next to a church, next to a kindergarten, next to a tall building, you know, it's got this kind of wild mix of uses that gives it a kind of vitality. And I thought about Jane Jacobs, and the part of the city that she loved the most, which is in New York City, of course, was Greenwich Village, which had, you know, stores and people making things down here, selling things up here, living above, working, you know, next door. And I thought, well, why can't we think of remaking these buildings in a much more radical way? And I call this radical mixed use. And so I sketched as a guinea pig One World Trade Center, our newest icon that replaced the original World Trade Center. And rather than being a monoculture, if the building could be rethought to be a heterogeneous culture that could potentially even be changed over time. And so big, deep floor plate would require that you cut out deep into the building. These buildings are interesting because they're supported by the core and by the edges. And so if you take the edges away, you just have to reframe the edges, frame them out, and then you're able to actually take that face away and make, let's say, green space deep into this building, and that would allow you to make housing or other things that need light or air deep into a floor plate that is considered too deep to be changed into housing. Moreover, my thought was, why can't this one building have everything that you would need? A 15-minute city in a vertical place. And you can just read what I have there. I mean, it's just pie in the sky. It's just a provocation. And then gave a TED talk, a year and a half ago, well after COVID, and I started thinking about, well, what are we doing wrong in the new build? Could our new build actually anticipate some of the problems that we have had with our existing buildings that are being vacated and they're obsolete? And if we think about them differently, maybe kind of expensive, in a more expensive way to begin with, but in a way that guarantees a life into the future, and also brings a kind of stimulating, raucous vitality to our cities. And again, this is a little bit inspired by Houston and its crazy mix. But here's what One World Trade Center might look like, with a very big, wide, fat, kind of, let's call it the muscle space where the offices would go. So the core is very far away. If you made a new kind of building with a core that's outdoors, essentially an atrium, let's say it's a courtyard building, and that all of the infrastructural elements that you need for a modern building to work, elevators, utility shafts, electric, plumbing, and technology, could be brought into this shaft at different times, never obviating, never taking one thing out of service before a new thing is in, and you're making a skinnier floor plate around the edges, and then changing zoning to allow for a kind of radical mixed use. This is one floor that might have an elementary school, a park. It has the light manufacturing, stuff that's not making noxious fumes or toxic residue, and housing, all on one floor. Why not? And then the idea would be, if your framework has a variety of heights, let's just say, and there's kind of there's a crane built in to it that would allow you to replace prefabricated component parts over time, that would build in sustainable systems, that would anticipate flooding, that would capture the rain, that would do black water retreatment, etc. And then you would get a kind of building that is potentially really ugly, but also really exciting, and that's always changing. And so this essentially was my TED talk. It was trying to anticipate flooding. I mean, our buildings, it's here in Hamburg, and we've learned about this today, how tricky it is to build here and how flooding is really a problem that we have to address. So have to think about that. Anyway, so this is Biscayne Boulevard in Miami. It was TEDx Miami that I gave this talk. And I think that's probably my last slide. And the end is just the beginning. Just want to say that. So thank you very much, and I will take questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any questions? Whilst you think of your questions, I would like to introduce Igor, who's here. Igor is the Dean of Rice School of Architecture, and on our trip to Houston 2 weeks ago, he was the most generous host to AAC. So I would like to give him a brief opportunity to say something about Rice.
Sure. Thank you, Anna. Thank you. And thank you, Charles, for a great talk. I don't want to get in the way of the questions of the lecture and the topic tonight, but I just want to say again how wonderful it is to be here, so thank you. It's my first time in Hamburg, actually, and I had a lightning quick tour with Anna of the waterfront, and I too learned about the amazing analogies to Houston, even though the cities look very different. Yeah. The climate collapse, the flooding control, there's a lot of things that are kind of front and center for both what's happening in Houston and what's happening here in Hamburg. I like to say that we are a very small school, a Rice School of Architecture. I think technically we're kind of the smallest professional program in the United States, but we are a school with a very big international reach, in part through the work of alumni like Charles, who goes around the world and has amazing projects, but also organizes partnerships of this kind that kind of puts education in a dialogue not only with other educators, but with practitioners, but also developers as well. And in many ways, that kind of think tank character of your work, the work of AAC, is also how we think about architecture at the Rice School of Architecture. In addition to some of our students here, we also have students in Tokyo this summer, in Mexico City, in Barcelona, exploring and learning from these different case studies and how lessons from one place can be brought to another one. And that kind of international character I really appreciate about your work. And I really appreciate the kind of radical approach to preservation. The idea that you can take the old building, you can slice it, you can open it up, but kind of keep the history and keep the narrative, I think is something that's really refreshing. And I think it can help the preservation movements, not just in those particular places and projects, but also elsewhere. So thank you again. Great to be a part of this, and thank you, Charles, for a great talk.
Thank you. I wanted to say that we and other practices like ours, you know, we have a duty to make preservation not just responsible, but sexy and hot, you know, and like that's sort of what our ambition is. It's a little bit clutch your pearls. Do you say that in Germany? No, people don't wear pearls here. But clutch your pearls, like, oh, I can't believe you know took the saw to that building. But in the end, we did save it, and we propped its history up and made a new history and a new life. So that's a large part of what this is about. And we'll see, because we're going to be on the crit tomorrow and see how the students. Yeah, exactly. Are you allowed to ask a question?
Yes, I think everybody in the room is allowed. I'm sorry.
Okay,
so
I'm sorry.
thank
I'm
you very
joking.
much for the talk. It was really worth coming for it.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I have a particular question about this storage building in Boston for MIT. Is it under historical protection? And if so, how did the authorities react on your Martha Clark intervention?
It is a historically revered but non-protected building. And so, luckily, because it was so obsolete, it was unusable for anything. And so, in order to make it usable, some surgery had to happen, but it wasn't preserved, and they knew that, and it was not preserved in resin as a historical artifact. But we have had to show it to the authorities there to make sure that everybody has felt comfortable with what we're doing. Thanks.
I also have a question, or two questions. First question is, you work a lot with museums, with performing arts centers, but my question is focused on museums. You, with all these interventions, you try to connect the visitors with the people working in the museum. You open up the magazines or depots or whatever. My question is, how do these users or the people working in the museum,
the employees,
how do they react on these kind of interventions? Because we do a lot of cultural buildings, as you know, and we always face problems when it comes to this link of the one and the other group. This is one question, and the other question is maybe easy to answer. Did you get permission for the canal water? Because we went to the opening of the pavilion. Did the Italians
they had
allow
not
you to use the canal water?
They had not tested the water. It wasn't that they rejected our use of it. But my understanding is that it is completely legitimate now. Although I heard last week that it might still be closed. Anyway, listen, I don't really know. I want to position my London person there all summer so that we can make sure that it's working. But the first question is a really important one, and it's like sometimes you can't will your kind of push your will or desire onto the people that work at these institutions, and sure enough, we've had to pull back on a lot of our ambitions to show people at work, doing intimate, dumb work, like preservation work. The V&A has been actually been very, very generous. We had a great partner with them. They like that the work of the preservationists can be seen. This is real work, and it's happening behind the scenes. Nobody understands it. But in other places, like in Budapest, we also had those preservation facilities on view, and they made us frost the glass so that you can only see the feet of people walking, and then the like storage areas behind. So, you win some, you lose some, but the ambition is there, and you still get a sense that stuff is happening behind the scenes.
We learned at some of the projects we did for new work at cultural institutions that the shift is that the culture is changing, and if they didn't want to be seen before, now they're proud to show, and it's gradually getting in that direction.
Yeah, I think so. It all depends on the institution also. Any other questions? I'm so sorry. Nothing, a little wine wouldn't help. Are there other questions out there? Any of the people in the program have questions? You got Igor and me here. Now that you've been working on your project for a couple of weeks, is there anything you want to ask us about Houston or anything, or no? We're also going to be with you tomorrow morning, so we can talk then more. But
there's also an opportunity to think of a question, and as I would like to invite you to come next door for a glass of wine.
Yes, perfect. That's great.
And let's continue the discussion there. Thank you again so much, Charles Renfro, for taking the time. For taking the time to put a lecture together for us, but also for taking the time to putting the program for this workshop together with us. Thank you very much.